Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. I am Precious Chukudi. Of course, it's a beautiful Tuesday morning. We start off with Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard is leading with aftermath of soldiers killing, bloodbath in Delta, villagers flee, hide in forest, and the writer says military on rampage, arrest community leaders, others over alleged harboring of perpetrators. Troops storm Bayelsa community, raise buildings, some fear dead. Oborivori visits a community. What triggered the bloodbath? Inhabitants. A result to propaganda by Okwama community. Carlos totally condemnable, and that's coming from the army. How soldiers were ambushed, killed in Delta community. That's coming from Major General Esekaigbe, retired. Killings of 16 soldiers by irate youth unacceptable. Defense ministers. Senate charges security agencies to smoke out undesirable outlaws. Senator Ndume Rep Balami mourns Major Danjuma Shafa. NHRC calls for restraint, prosecution of a culprit. There will be measurable response, injurious consequences for perpetrators, and that's coming from DHQ. And of course, we have photos as released by the defense headquarters of the fallen soldiers that were killed in Okwama community. And on page 9, SANWO-OLU ground varsities over withheld salaries. Undersea cable cut, service now restored. Telcos NCC confirm. Ibadan Circular Road, over 6,000 residents to be rendered homeless. You can see that on page 10. Pardon, Obi calls for review of 2024 budget. Stories above, Nigeria doomed without new constitution. And that's coming from ANYAOKU, ADEBANJO, NWACHUKWU, ATTAH, and SANWO-OLU. On page 27, terrorists kidnap 87 in fresh Kaduna attack. Edo Guba, APC unveils Idahosa running mate. Tinubu predicts victory for APC, presents party flag to Okwebolo. PDP picks Ogie as Igodalo's running mate. Okwebolo dynasty OK's Igodalo candidacy. Lastly, on the front page of Vanguard newspaper, we have energy crisis, vandalism, death, others in that 8,000 megawatt supply, and that's coming from a report. We take a look at the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian is leading with inflation and rising construction costs. Low middle class defer home ownership plans for food. We can see an infographic report showing on that story. A court convicts a 5 for murder, kidnapping in Rivers. Settle NASU SANWO members urgently. NLC tells government. Looting depicts misrule, misery, and decadence in society. And that's come from the editorial page. Tinubu meets Edo APC chiefs over state crisis. SANWO-OLU ex-governors orders call for new constitution. Terrorism, Ohaneze cautions Tinubu as gunmen abduct dozens in fresh Kaduna attack. Implementation hurdles for copious provision in new electricity act. Metering gaps remain despite 273.3 billion naira loan to discos for meters, others. We take a look at the Punch newspaper. The Punch is leading with soldiers killing. Army Delta community differ over reprisal as troops arrest 20. Writer says Army accuses community of complicity. DHQ releases photos, names of fallen soldiers. Delta governor visit Okwama, meets with JTF commander. Rep urges restraint. IYC condemns attack. Withheld salaries. SANWO-OLU strike grounds varsity. 2,814 schools registered for NSCDC security arrangement, and that's come from the commander. EFCC recovers 324 houses, document for Kano pensioners. Tension in Ogun as transport union clash over ticket sales. Stories above. Dollar supply rise to $11 billion. Naira closes at 1,572 to a dollar. Cable cut, telcos pledge 100% voice data service today. And lastly, on the front page of the Punch newspaper, Rep summon Edu Ramfak over judges' poor pay. And that's all we can take on the front pages of the papers. Join us after the break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. If you're just joining us today in the news on Vanguard Live, I am Precious Chukudi, and joining me to talk about some of the stories on the front pages of the papers this morning is Mr. Dayo Akintobi, publisher of Illupeju Today, Ikeja Today, and Lekki Today. It's good to have you join me this morning, sir.
Always a pleasure to be here. Good morning to all of you.
All right, you're welcome. Of course, let's delve in, and we've been talking about the killings of soldiers in Okwama community, and there seems to be different stories coming from there, with the soldiers having their own reports and also the indigents of that community having their own reports. The residents, their own stories that the soldiers, came and opened fire on them after they had started to, dialogue peacefully until they said they wanted to take, some of their community leaders and they refused. What's your take on, this incident?
It's really tragic and rather unfortunate. And whatever the truth of the matter is, because like you said, there are conflicting stories. The army is telling one story, the community people are telling another. What we know is at the end of the day, 17 military men lost their lives. The community is also claiming that there was loss of life on their side as well. The one thing that seems rather unusual and that gives me a bit of pause is that in a communal clash between two neighboring communities, that's usually a matter for the police, not something that you will find the army. The army is supposed to defend the territorial integrity of the country. It's supposed to defend against external aggression. Usually, the army is not involved in internal conflicts. It's not involved in resolving internal conflicts. But because of terrorism, banditry, Boko Haram, and all of these other internal crises we've had of late, we've had to draft the army into local police work. But under normal circumstances, remember, the army is trained to kill, because that's essentially in defending the integrity of our borders. They usually have to use force. So the army is trained to deploy force, and they are not the very best of people to be trying to dialogue for peaceful resolution of issues. They don't seek peaceful resolution. They are there to use force to bring about resolution, not dialogue. By the time the army is called in, dialogue has failed, really. So they might not be the best in terms of tactics or strategy or how to go about having a dialogue. So I don't know if that's where things went awry. But what the community is basically saying is that they welcomed them. They even said they broke cola nuts with them. They had a nice round table discussion. They more or less resolved the issues. Then at the end of the meeting, the army insisted on taking away the community leaders. And then the people resisted and said, but we've resolved this thing. Why are you taking our people away? And that was where things went belly up. That's where things went bad. How exactly it went bad, we don't really know until an investigation is completed. But the bottom line is that the gallant men of our military put their lives on the line for us on a daily basis, as do the police and all of our other law enforcement and military personnel. And when something like this happens, your heart really bleeds. I mean, it's a tragedy on the country. You can imagine the families of those who lost their lives, and even just us as a people were diminished by this. And so, whatever led to it, I hope the government will be able to unravel it and bring to book those who were responsible. Because at the end of the day, they've said, the community has been raised by the army the following day, but reprisal is not the solution. What matters is that those who are involved in criminality, for whatever reason, those who are involved in the taking of lives, whether on either side, they should be thoroughly investigated and made to pay the price for their crimes.
All right. Of course, we saw that the Defense HQ has it came out to say that there will be measured responses and injurious consequences, of which people have been calling that the army should, comply with the rule of law. And we know how the army can really be. What's your take?
Well, the army has to show restraint. I know that they are pain, they are hurting right now, that their colleagues have been lost. And the knee-jerk reaction is to unleash a volley of violence in reprisal, and how dare anybody do this to us? We're putting our lives on the line for the country. How can we be paid back like this? And it's an eye for an eye. We don't take no nonsense. And so their spontaneous reaction will be to unleash violence. We've already seen that a few communities have been raised already in response to what has happened. But like everyone is counseling, we do need to have the army show some restraint, because we don't want a total breakdown of law and order. We don't want anarchy. We don't want chaos. Now remember, the army is fully armed. That's what they call army. They are fully armed and trained to unleash violence. They are trained to take down any sort of resistance. That's their training. So if they were to unleash their capabilities upon an innocent citizenry, the collateral damage will be immeasurable. There'll be women, there'll be children, there'll be elderly who will either be maimed or lose their lives. There will be communities that will be completely decimated, annihilated, and you don't want to see the wrath of the army. So that's why people are calling for restraint on the part of the army and say, okay, this has happened. We promise there will be an investigation. We'll find out the root causes, and we will punish those responsible for taking the lives of these gallant officers. So the army will do well to take a chill pill, as they say, and just be measured in their demeanor for now. I know they're hurting, but for the good of the country, for the overall good of the country. Because if the army decides to go on the offensive, there's nothing we can do. They will cause a lot of havoc. They will. They have the wherewithal and the means to do that. So we're appealing to them that they should please be measured, manage to hold themselves, to hold their pain and their anguish. Because you hurt one soldier, you've hurt all of them. So they're taking it personally and they're feeling the pain. Because it could have been any of them. All their lives are at the forefront of fighting to protect all the rest of us.
Alright, so moving on now, Peter Obi has advised the executive and legislative arms of government to immensely review the 2024 budget in order to deploy funds to critical areas. Now, what's your take on the controversies that's been trailing the 2024 budget?
Yes, it's a bit messy, really, for a new government that's just come in. It's his first budget, really, and to have all this kind of controversy. First, there was the issue of padding. Then there was the issue of, could there be two different budgets being run at the same time? There was the issue of, so much was added by the National Assembly. Then, of course, came the revelation of 500 million as constituency allowance for each senator. So what Peter Obi is saying, he's trying to be a good opposition. What he's essentially saying is, all these places where we see leakages, wastage, misprioritized spending, that it's not too late in the day to take a second look at this budget and review it and rewrite it. That we're still just a few months into its implementation. This is just March. The thing started January 1. This is just the third month. So we still have 9 months to go in the budget. That is not too late for you to retrace your steps. Say, yes, we made a mistake. That there are too many areas of contention in the budget as it exists now. And now that it has come public, the public is quite dissatisfied. And he feels like we can reroute some of the lavish expenditure, the unnecessary expenditure. We can reroute some of it into critical areas. And he mentioned security, he mentioned agriculture, and he mentioned 1 or 2 other areas, education, and he felt is in dire need of more money. And if you look at the education budget, I think it's about 5% of the total budget. That could use a lot more money. Look at the unions in the universities, the senior staff, senior non-academic staff who are going on strike now because they say they've not been paid, I think, for 2 years or thereabouts. That monies could be allocated to these things to help these situations better and help improve our economy, as opposed to what portion of the budget is going to so few a number of people and not benefiting the larger majority of Nigerians. So his contention, his train of thought, I think there's some merit to it, that there's nothing wrong with reviewing the budget to see if it can be improved upon. Every budget should be a work in progress. It should never be a final document, because life is not static. Life is dynamic. On a daily basis, things are changing. So we need to be able to adjust to the changes of our daily realities. So if some things are more pressing today than the one when the budget was passed in January 1, why can't we redirect some of the monies to more critical areas? So I don't think Peter Obi was too off base in what he was saying.
All right, moving on. There are calls for Nigeria to do away with the 1999 constitution and give Nigeria people a new constitution. What's your take? How do you react?
Well, look at the names of the people who are associated with that comment yesterday. You know, the heavyweights. You know, I saw ANYAOKU, I saw SANWO-OLU, I saw a whole bunch of names who threw their weight behind this idea that the 1999 constitution is not working, cannot work, and will not work for the country, and it needs to be revisited. I believe that is true to some extent. If you remember, the 1999 constitution is what more or less a military constitution that was foisted upon with the people by the outgoing military administration. I believe they put together a constitution drafting committee that they had selected. They gave them, I think, the 1979 constitution and said, work with this as a template and develop something. And that 79 constitution itself was just a clone of the US Constitution and was not particularly tailored to our own idiosyncrasies, to our own peculiarities in this country. So many view that Constitution as a round peg in a square hole, where it's not ideally suited to us, and is largely responsible for a lot of our problems, especially in terms of things that you see on the restricted on the executive list, that only the federal government can deal with, things like security, things like power, which Buhari signed, that the states can generate their own power. There are a lot of things that are on the executive list that people believe should either be on the concurrent list or be on the other list that the states alone can have power to do. So there's a lot of talk about devolving power, about restructuring, about going to a parliamentary system. But I will say one thing. In as much as I agree that the constitution is not ideally suited to us and should be reviewed and rewritten, I also don't think it's the most important thing, because I think the people that are running government, the people we have that run government today, that have been running our government historically, I think they are the larger problem than the constitution itself. The dramatis personae, as they say, the principal actors. If we don't have a rethink of our orientation towards public service, no matter what document we have on ground, we will still have the same problems. So if we go to a parliamentary system, or we write the constitution in the way that it devolves power from the center, if we even go to a regional system whereby the regions are competing against each other and each is developing its own revenue, as long as we have the same set of people with the same mindset, with the same orientation, running a different system, the results will be the same. Because I think that whatever rules that we agree to live by, however we codify those rules, it is the people who are implementing those rules as they relate to our daily lives. It is how they approach it that makes a difference. So the rules in and of themselves are not fatal. They're not fatally flawed. They have problems that need to be fixed. But if we have the right people running this country, even under this constitution, we'll be developing faster. So my contention is that more than the constitution, it's the principal actors who are flawed and who need to be corrected, or who need their orientations to change. And after that is done, we can now begin to discuss what is the proper structure in terms of constitution, in terms of laws, in terms of the agreements between us as to how we want to live together.
All right, so you now, what do you think is the way forward away from this constitution?
Well, for starters, the big problem with the constitution was that it was foisted upon 200 million people by just a minority of people. So I think we all need to sit down and discuss the terms by which we want to live together. Remember, there's been agitations for secession because people are not satisfied with this geographic expression called Nigeria as a country. So there's some who don't buy into the notion of Nigeria. I don't think they'd be better off on their own. So what I'm saying is we need to have a national conversation, not one that is dictated by the military, not one that is hijacked by the elite, but one in which the entire country has a say. Perhaps each community elect a handful of people to go and represent them. Each sector in the economy elect a few people, and those people go and represent the entire country, sit down, have a discussion, and agree on the terms and conditions by which we want to live. Those who feel they don't want to be part of the union can choose to go. Those who want to be a part of the union, okay, how do we live together peacefully, in harmony, and in a way that we can all develop economically and be happy. We need to discuss those things. Do we want a presidential system? Do we want a parliamentary system? Do we want one whereby we have one term of 6 years or 5 years for the president as opposed to re-election? Do we want to reduce the cost of governance? Do we want government to be smaller? Do we want more taxes or less taxes? Do we want it to be a situation where there's private property, and by private property I mean the minerals underneath the ground? If you dig your backyard in your house and you strike gold or you strike oil, do we want it to belong to you and then you pay taxes to the government as is done in other countries? Or should the government own everything that's beneath the ground? So we can negotiate all those kind of things and come together and agree, so that by that time we now have a constitution that is universally adopted by everyone. So there is no tension. We now have tension in society because people disagree to the rules. No, or better yet, not everybody agrees to the terms by which we are holding ourselves together, or we are living together. In other words, we're not coexisting harmoniously because the foundation underneath our togetherness was not agreed to by all of us. So I think that has got to be the starting point.
All right. Okay, moving on, let's touch on Mr. and Mrs. before we go. And since Mrs. is speaking this morning, she says, I know you like eating apples after meal, but I couldn't find your favorite, so I bought another type. And Mr. asks, which type of apple? And she says, pineapple.
Pineapple is not a type of apple. It's a fruit, yeah, but it's not a type of apple. But I guess, that's interesting. All right, nice one, Mrs.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Dali Akintoye, publisher of Liquidity Today, Ikeja Today, and Lekki Today. Thank you for sharing your talk with us. Very interesting. Also, remember that you can equally like, share, and subscribe on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. To find out today's stories, go to our website, www.vanguardindia.com, to find out more. I am Precious Chukudi.